Red Bull reigns supreme. Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin steal the show, and McLaren all but call it quits. This is Into the Chicane, a Formula One podcast, post-Bahrain Grand Prix edition. I'm Channing Apodaca, back with my buddy, my co-producer, my co-host, Brandon Wood.
Yo.
Say hello, my friend. Post-Bahrain Grand Prix, first race of the season. How'd you feel about it?
It was amazing. It was everything we were looking for. And I'm excited to talk about it.
It was, the race itself, I would say, was a little bit lackluster. We did have some good on-track battles that were a lot of fun. But the weekend as a whole, all the drama, all the storylines surrounding it is what made this so exciting. This was a good one. Let's get right into it. Excuse me. That was that burp I was talking about. Right before we hit record, I was like, hold on, let me burp. I can feel one coming. There it was.
There it is.
Maybe I'll leave it. Maybe I'll edit that out. I don't know. Let's see. We had some pre-practice news. Big story right there. Top one. Lance Stroll will race in Bahrain. The team announced going into the weekend that Lance Stroll will suffer the follies of an injured wrist and just go ahead and race anyway. This was a decision that, you know, during the practice sessions, a lot of pundits, a lot of people in the geosphere of F1 were calling a pretty bad idea. What did you think about that?
Yeah, well, the big question was, how hurt was Lance really? Yeah. How long was he going to need to really recover?
It sounds like a bad stand-up bit. Lance Stroll's hurt. How hurt was he?
How hurt
people were questioning whether or not he was going to actually be able to steer the car, how bad his wrist or wrists actually were, if there were any other underlying injuries. And then as it became, as the weekend went on, it kind of became apparent that things were pretty bad with him.
Yeah.
And that the call that they made to put him in the car, and the call that he made himself to say that I'm ready to do this, was maybe a little iffy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did do some simulation runs ahead of time, so he kind of knew that he would have at least some strength to get through. So,
yeah, there was also, there were shots of him struggling to get in and out of the car, which became a safety concern that people were talking about. I'll say this. I'm glad that Lance Stroll raced. Let's check out this video. Is this the video you got queued up right here?
Yeah. This was
so
after
he had
FP2.
It was after FP2. He had to be helped out of his car because of the wrist injury that he sustained in a bicycle accident. Let's see. He's grabbing the halo and he's using his wrists.
It was using his elbows because he didn't want to.
Or not his wrists. That would be horrible. He's using his elbows to prop himself out, which, I mean, a couple things I'll say about this. Kudos to him for having that dog in him to want to get out there on track. Say what you want about Lance Stroll. He's got some Canadian bark to him. Also, a little bit selfish of him to want to get in the car himself, but also you got to understand it. They kind of get in there. They know what their car is capable of this year. Yeah. We kind of didn't. We'll get into that a little bit more. They knew what their car is capable of going into this year, and those are valuable points that Lance was potentially leaving, and he did grab a good chunk of points. I think he grabbed 8 points, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. I forget what. He finished, 5th or 6th? That's about 8 points. But valuable points that he grabbed not only for the team, but that he grabbed for himself. Let's see, Lance Stroll.
Yeah, 8 points.
8 points. That would have gone to Felipe Drugovich should he even finish in that position. But Lance got the job done. People were what would you call it? They were spiting him. They were calling him out for having made that decision when it became pretty obvious that he was in a lot of pain, that he was struggling to drive the car. He was saying that he could barely turn it. There were certain maneuvers and practices that he couldn't even make. And then they were bringing up the Roman Grosjean accident, saying that if he had gotten in an accident like that he wouldn't have been able to pull himself out of the car due to a wrist injury. That I don't like. I think that's a load of shit. If you're on fire, you're going to forgo the pain in your wrist because the pain on the largest organ in your body is about to kill you.
Yeah, you could also say, will he have the strength? And that was part of the thought from a lot of people was watching him in practice. He did the whole maneuver where he took his hand off the wheel to put it underneath so he can actually get the wheel turned all the way. Mm-hmm. And people were looking at that and saying, how is that safe? How is that, watching him take his hands off the wheel going down the straight so he can relieve some of the tension that had built up in his wrists. And it's like, well.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that the FIA didn't step in and do something about it because it was obvious that he wasn't ready. And then it became apparent, the news came out that initially they thought he might not be ready till potentially Australia, which is race 3 on the season.
So doctors had told him it could be a few races.
So he definitely came back prematurely, but he got it done. End of the day, he nabbed some super valuable points that the team needed. A fully healthy Lance Stroll might have grabbed some more. He might have ended up.
I mean, here's the thing, like immediately in practice, like even with his hand issues or whatever, he was still quick.
Yeah.
You could tell he was, still figuring out the car, but he was showing some real potential already.
Yeah, he did get less time in the car than his teammate Fernando Alonso. And I think even less time than reserve driver Felipe Drugovich. But good on Lance. Also, he scored me some great fantasy points. I believe I'm leading our fantasy league. It's probably not going to last long, so I'm going to bask in that for at least the next 2 weeks until Saudi Arabia. Next little bit of news, pre-practice news. AlphaTauri announced that they will not be selling the team. You and I talked about this. Good on you guys for addressing a giant rumor. I like when teams address big rumors. I don't fully buy it.
Don't believe it for one second.
Yeah, teams will do this. They'll balk at any bit of news, and then the second they actually sign the deal, they'll go, well, an opportunity came up that we couldn't ignore. Despite all the rumors swirling, this was our first look at actually securing this deal ourselves, which is just a bunch of bullshit. What was the announcement that we talked about? The Daniel Ricciardo last season?
Yeah, that they weren't going to be changing anything about the relationship.
McLaren did this where there was giant rumors that Daniel Ricciardo was going to be kicked off the team, and they shut all that down, saying these are just swirling rumors. Daniel Ricciardo is a valued member of this team. We value his contract, which will not be nullified under any blah, 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 blah. And then the second they were able to get Oscar Piastri behind closed doors and get pen to paper, a tweet went out saying that, oh, you know what? Yeah, actually, my time here is come to an end. So I don't buy that for a second. We could probably go on OfferUp right now and type in AlphaTauri and find a good deal.
Yeah, who knows what kind of commitments they have financially with sponsors and stuff that they don't want to upset. They don't want to give away too much right now, so they're not.
They do have a giant new sponsor in Orland that's blasted all over their car, and that's, a brand new sponsor. So who knows if they want to, be blasting anything just yet. Right, moving on to practice. Alpine not looking happy. Last episode we were talking about how in preseason testing Alpine was pretty insignificant in the entire testing weekend, and I think I said something to the lines of no news is good news on their front. Well, I was wrong. Guess what, guys? I was wrong about that because they don't look good. They didn't look good all weekend. They didn't look good in practice. They were nowhere to be found. They didn't look good in quali. They didn't look good in the race. Other than that, what about Alpine for practice?
I had a little clip of their technical engineer shaking his head, but it seems to have been deleted since. So I don't know if the New World Order is trying to erase all existence.
Oh, did you have it saved on Twitter?
Yeah, I just had a link to the video that it was a little clip, so it might be a little bit of a bust, but
yeah, I mean, just overall, like heading into the weekend, they didn't look good. We'll get a little bit more into that for them. Also, practice. Was it FP1? Carlos had that big spin.
Sure did. I was kind of just the whole practice for Ferrari just kind of didn't seem like they really had everything quite figured out yet. Still,
yeah. They came into the season after preseason testing looking like a bona fide number 2 with questions, at least from, I think, us swirling about how far will Aston Martin go. I think we ranked them, 4th?
Aston Martin?
Yeah. Going after preseason, we had them finishing 4th, which is now has a big asterisk next to it. But Ferrari, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we even just gave them 3rd. Or do we
No, we moved them up.
Swapped it at the end.
The 2 big ones that we struggled with were moving McLaren back down the order closer to the midfield when I think we had originally put them at the bottom, and then we struggled with giving Aston Martin the credit that they now deserve. But yeah, so Carlos had a big spin, looking shaky in his car. I don't remember a whole lot of what happened with Chuck. No news on his front. Lance, again, like we said, needing help getting out of his car. The big surprise, I think, from all practices this week in FP1, FP2, FP3, Fernando Alonso topped the charts in 2 of those.
Sure did.
Max Verstappen, I think, claimed fastest time in FP2. But this is where Aston Martin really put their foot down and made this a bona fide shot.
Yeah, it's where we saw that like what was happening in practice wasn't really a fluke. It was
In preseason testing, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Once practices came around, we really saw that this Aston Martin this year is no joke, and that Lawrence Stroll's 5-year plan and Fernando's L plan are coming to fruition. Moving into qualifying, we had a red flag early, right?
Yeah, pieces flying off of the Ferrari.
Was he hit, or were they just coming off?
From what it looked to me, just the piece from the little wing on the front, on the inside of the tire, it just flew off. Like lost a bolt or something. It just kind of fell off. He didn't really clip anything or a curb or anything.
Yeah. How far into FP1 did you get when it was live? Because that was broadcast at 3:30 a.m. our time.
I watched everything later.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I fell asleep. I had turned it on. I was on the couch, and I fell asleep about 2 laps in to FP1 after telling myself, well, I'm up. I'm just going to watch it anyways. Qualifying. Pieces flying off of Charles' car, red flag early on. And then Pierre Gasly, new team member to Alpine, who we had just mentioned was struggling in the practice sessions, out in Q1. This was one of the closest Q1 sessions that I think we had seen in years, right? It's been a decade or more since all of the cars have been this close together. It was 1.17 seconds apart, covered the entire field. That means from P1 all the way down to P20. That's the session that you want.
Yeah.
Rarely in Formula One is Q1 the most exciting session of the day. It's usually Q3, which ended up being, for whatever reason, a little bit lackluster, but Q1 was just an absolute barn burner.
Yeah, Logan missed out on Q2 by less than, 10 thousandths of a second. He had basically the exact same time as Lando.
Yeah, I mean, he missed out on it by 0. It was mathematically exact time that their chips programmed into their cars crossed that line, and because Lando Norris crossed the line first, it goes to Lando. It's like, tie goes to the runner in baseball or whatever that rule is. But great showing for the American kid in his very first qualifying session.
Yeah.
In a Williams. His teammate, Alex Albon, makes it into Q2 and then almost made it into Q3. Am I right? I believe he qualified P11.
Let me see.
Yeah, you got my screen turned off. You're hiding something from me there. So that's
I got the qualifying times here. Alex qualified 15th.
15th?
Yeah.
Oh, he was the last one in Q2?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got me all shook up. He did end up moving up the order as soon as the race started, though. You have written down here under qualifying notes, Lance reweighing car.
So at one point, I think it was in Q2, he missed. It was kind of hard to figure out what exactly was going on, but the Aston Martin team ended up having to push their car back to the front of the pits where the entry is to have the car weighed again.
I don't remember seeing this. I watched it twice.
Yeah, and it was very curious as to why that was happening.
And nobody really delved into what the outcome of it was?
No, I wasn't quite sure.
I do vaguely remember seeing the team pushing him along, but I must not have been paying great attention. That shows how invested I am, right? And I keep telling people that qualies are just as exciting as the race.
Yeah, but he went on to knock out Lando.
Yeah, he put in. He was one of the last to cross the line. I think he crossed the line with 0 time left. He was at that point. He was out of Q2 or out of Q3. He wasn't going to make it, and then he got his last lap in, being on track just in time, crossed the line, and put it P6, P5, P6, somewhere around there.
6, yeah.
Which good on him. I do remember now seeing them bring him back into the garage, and there was something like only 2 minutes, 30 seconds on the clock, and I was kind of clocking it in my head because they had put new soft tires on his car, and then he would need a fairly quick lap in order to get around the circuit in time to qualify for a fast lap and have time on the clock to finish that out. So I do remember him getting kind of wheeled around in the garage there, and it was a little sketchy for them. Q3, Charles Leclerc immediately gets out of the car after his first run and stays in the garage to save their tires. What did you make of that?
It was interesting because it was so early on, and there was a lot of talk about how the track speed was just going up as the qualifying was going on, and so it was like kind of like a weird strategy for them to take. But when they said that it could just be saving their tires for the next day, it kind of made sense. Like
that's what I figured that they were going for, because he really only had one after his first run, and he had a late run, right? Because I remember when seeing him get out of his car, there was like still about 5 minutes or so left on the clock, if not less, and they had pulled him in. So interesting that he only got one. Either way, he put it in that one lap. He had put it in P2 or P3, right?
Let's see. He ended up qualifying.
Well, he qualified P3, but at the time, I forget where he was on the board. Checo, I believe. Yeah, Checo passed him. When Checo put in his lap, he put it in P2, and that bumped Leclerc down to P3, I believe. Either way, regardless of how it went down, I found this frustrating personally to see.
Really?
Yeah, something about Ferrari always trying to outthink. It seems to me that Ferrari is always trying to outthink and out-strategize Red Bull. Just go out there and do the best you can. Put Charles Leclerc back on the track, even if he's got those same soft tires on. The track's getting hotter. It's just one lap. Let him run it. Or put one new pair of shoes on it. Run those tires for 2 laps. One warm-up lap, one flying lap. 1 lap old tires in a race aren't going to absolutely kill you. I understand the advantage of brand new tires in the race. I get that, but they're always trying to outthink Red Bull. And in the end, it did nothing for them.
Yeah. To me, it represents a lack of confidence in the speed of their car.
Yeah.
Even though it is fast, but they know that they can't win on speed and performance of the car alone. They have to try and strategize around that. But last year, it just bit them too many times. And this year, we were hoping to see some difference in strategy with Vasseur coming in and changing up a bunch of personnel.
Yeah, I mean, all credit to Fred Vasseur. I love that guy. But after this race, it looks like Bonanno 2.0, and it's starting to look like Bonanno wasn't even the issue. But maybe some of their strategists and race engineers are possibly to blame for a lot of the mistakes, because I thought, they were just completely beat by Red Bull from the jump in this one. But yeah, I do agree. It showed that they understand where they're at in the pecking order, and especially with the emergence of Aston Martin, which will, of course, we keep saying it, but we're going to talk about it a little bit more. So yeah, Ferrari trying their best to out-strategize Red Bull as they tend to do, and good on them for making the attempt. But Max Verstappen ends up taking pole. Sergio Perez puts in a faster lap than Charles Leclerc. He's followed by teammate Carlos Sainz. And then Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin qualified 5th. After watching the entire weekend and everything leading up to this weekend, all the practice sessions that he had topped, this, I think, was an overall disappointment for F1 fans. As much of an awesome surprise as it has been, it was a little bit of a letdown because they were riding on such a high. We really, it looked like for a while that Fernando Alonso might put this thing on pole, that he might take the very first pole of the season. He put in a 1:30.645, and then a 1:30.336, which ended up being almost an entire second slower than Max Verstappen. So it looked for a second to like Red Bull had sandbagged a little bit, not only in the practices, but in Q1 and Q2.
I'm going to give a little pushback on that term.
Okay.
I don't like this term. I don't understand people throwing around the term sandbagging. It doesn't, because with that term sandbagging, that gives the implication that a team is purposely not showing all of the power that they have in an attempt to trick the competition into thinking that they're slower than they actually are.
Yeah.
To me, it's obvious why they're not going to turn their car all the way up until it's actually race time.
Yeah.
Why they're not going to turn the motors all the way up.
Save the engine,
save reliability. There is some value in testing runs at high speed, so you know what the aero is going to be like when you're at the top speed. But I can also understand them saving a little bit just off of reliability reasons.
Yeah, I get that. I also, I think the term gets thrown around because there are those teams which can't afford the luxury of not going into their best engine mode. The Haas's, the Williams, the McLarens now of the world have to go into the highest engine mode, the best top power that they have afforded to them for every single qualifying session because they need to squeak out every bit of power out of this thing that they can. They don't have the luxury of, knowing like the way that Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes have known for the past few seasons that they're going to make it into Q3. So that's why I think when you see like how Red Bull did, both cars put in pretty similar 131s, and then in Q2 they put in pretty similar 130s, and then both of them dropped down to below 130 into the 129, separated by a couple milliseconds. So they got faster as each qualifying session goes on. I get why people use the term sandbagging. I know what it looks like. You might be right in that it's just about saving the engine. I get.
Because most of the time when I see someone on Twitter or something using that phrase, that's what they're implying is that, they're just trying to pull one over on everybody. They're not giving up their full potential just on purpose.
Yeah, Mercedes was accused of that during for the last few years during this run of dominance. It was like the running theme every preseason that, is Mercedes just sandbagging? Because they would always go into practice.
What advantage does a team get by sandbagging?
I don't know. I think it's if it's a thing, I would say it's just a mental game. It's just a mental game where people go, and maybe it gives drivers the idea that they can attack the Mercedes, and then the Mercedes just turns it on. But again, you do end up seeing it before the race, regardless. You see it in Q3, which is what we're seeing now. Which is it's not a fight. Sometimes you'll get fighting on track, but it's a race against yourself. It's a time trial, and then there's certain strategies of getting you on track at the right time. But yeah, I guess the term is moot because, like I just said, you do end up seeing the full power and full potential of each car eventually, just in the last 15 minutes of the qualifying period. But let's get into this race. I can't tell you how excited I was to be watching a Formula One race after a year off. Unfortunately, I did watch it by myself on the couch here in Los Angeles at 7 in the morning. We were supposed to have one of our famous race parties here. Everybody bailed. Everybody bailed. Some people got sick. You had baby-related stuff. And for the rest, I just canceled, which we know was funny. I had people texting me at 7 this morning. Are we still on? And I was like, you guys
I'm watching the race has already started.
I go, no, we're not. Because I got no response from you guys. Yeah, exactly. We'll get in, later on in races, in the season, we'll probably have some fun talking about our race days that we do here. But to start this off, we have Max Verstappen on pole, followed by Sergio Perez, the two Ferraris, and Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. That's as deep as I want to go into the field order because that's where all the excitement happened to start the race. Man, first thing I have that comes to mind is Sergio Perez, bad starts. Consistently bad starts. I literally couldn't tell it. I know, you really do. One of our favorite drivers, I think a crowd favorite, finally getting his time these past 3 seasons in a good car. And it's not like it's terrible, but you do consistently see him losing his initial grid position whether he's on pole, which is rare, or if he's in second, third, or fourth, you always see him losing a spot to whichever contender or non-contender is behind him. It's starting to get disappointing. At the start of this race, he loses out on the P2 spot to Charles Leclerc, and good on Leclerc. Leclerc got a great launch, made a nice little move on Checo, but also wasn't too hard. And then Checo also had to fend off the Ferrari to his bottom right of Carlos Sainz, which it got pretty scrappy there in the beginning between those three. They went very far wide to the right. I think they went off track limits into the pit lane exit a little bit.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is just that second starting position is also not as ideal.
At Bahrain, yeah. There are a lot of tracks, and I have an issue with this in Formula One in general. There are a lot of tracks where the P2 spot is, because you get the inside line, is the ideal position to be in. Here at Bahrain, it's on the right, on the outside. Regardless of what Checo did, it didn't really matter because Max's dominance to start this race kicked in right away. He was up 5 seconds on the rest of the pack within the first 6 laps. That means that he was averaging over a second to start this race on every single lap. Clean air, nobody in front of him, and he never looked back. I think the only time that he didn't lead the race was when he pitted and Checo took the lead. His second pit, I think he still had time. He was able to clear the rest of the field order with time in between.
Yeah, he had like 3 or 4 seconds on.
Yeah, on Checo, who came up behind him, or whoever it was at that point. Nico Hülkenberg, unfortunately, after qualifying like a beast, I forget where did he find himself? 10th in the Haas, which is great. He lost
was so
4
stoked.
positions.
I was so here for it.
I think we're all here for Nico. I think everybody, if you are not a Nico stan, and I hate to use Gen Z terminology like that, then you can fuck right off. This is a Nico house here, okay? We support Nico Hülkenberg. Yeah, that was painful to see him lose those 4 spots. The McLaren, the Alfa Romeos, and Alfa Tauri eventually, of our buddy Yuki, eventually get around him. But he also had no help. He was out there up at the top of the midfield all by himself.
Yeah, what happened to K-Mag?
Where was K-Mag?
He just disappeared, fell to the back.
He, in qualifying, if I remember, he was at the back of the pack. He qualified 17th, only put in 6 laps total in Q1. I don't know if they were having any kind of mechanical issues, hydraulic issues, potentially tire degradation issues, which would be a stupid thing to put them out, but...
Yeah, we didn't really get too much information there. I think everyone was kind of just like, oh yeah, it's Haas.
Yeah,
we just
didn't see K-Mag a whole lot over the weekend. Had a bad start to the race. That's, all I really remember. And then lap 1, the Drama Boys, the stars of this season, the boys in green, the Aston Martins, Lance Stroll runs right into the back of his teammate, Fernando Alonso, on lap 1, turn 3, maybe 4.
When that happened, I thought it was over. I was like, there goes Aston Martin's dreams for the whole rest of the season.
I mean, I saw them come together. The announcers lost their shit, and I was like, oh no, after this entire, this big uphill battle, this roller coaster that we've seen them on, is it really going to happen like this? Are they going to go out in their first first race of the season of this amazing potential that we have in front of them? But no, I don't think Lance lost any body parts. All he did was give Fernando a little bit of a touch. Fernando bumped to the side a little bit. The best part about it was Fernando Alonso's race engineer telling him, Fernando goes on the radio and he says, they can't do that they need to get a penalty. And then his engineer kind of...
So yeah, we'll look into it.
He
didn't even say that it was Lance.
Chose not to let him know that it was Lance, as if he wasn't going to find out eventually anyways. I don't know that it would have changed his race. Fernando probably would have just forgiven him and remembered who signs his checks to begin with.
Yeah.
Because even after the race, Fernando goes on and he says, first things first, I want to congratulate my teammate Lance Stroll on an incredible race. I don't know if he's trolling with how hard he's, sucking at the teat.
Yeah, It's hard
Part
to
of
tell.
me's here for it though, because he seems like he does everything with such a wink.
Swag.
Yeah, he does it with swag, with confidence, but with this like little wink to his eye that you don't know if he's kind of laughing on the inside about it. But
Sure, it could be somewhat in jest, but
exactly,
it doesn't really matter.
But yeah, they came together, made out better on the end because we'll get to the result later. But yeah, nothing majored there in terms of damage in that collision. And then we have both Williams up early and had a good run to hold. They went long on the soft tires, about 4 laps over their degradation zone. So Williams looked good in this race. They looked better than expected.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, practice, not looking great. Sitting towards the back of the field, didn't have pace. Qualifying, Alex actually had a little bit of a...
He made it into Q2.
Made it into Q2, had a nice little run going, and things were looking a little bit better, but still starting 15th.
Yeah.
It's nothing to write home about. Logan started 16th.
Let's see.
On the grid.
I think, they were back-to-back, which is a great starting position for Logan. Like we said earlier, he missed out on Q2 by literally 0, by the number 0. But overall, Williams had a great showing in this race. I was a little bit surprised at their lack of pace in practice because I thought going into the season that they were going to be a little bit stronger than last year. They're on the up and up. They seem to have things getting a little bit more dialed in. I think we talked about this in our first episode rankings. And so I was a little bit surprised to find them running in the back of the pack during practice, but this qualifying session and then the race show that they do have a little bit of pace and that Alex Albon is in tip-top shape to lead this team to the top of their ceiling, Yeah. Good on both of them. Also, again, another shout out, Logan Sargent, the American kid, making us all proud. I remember watching this race and texting my buddies from Florida, your boy's, crushing it right now. He's having himself a good race. Kudos to him.
Yeah, I was surprised we didn't really hear anything about him.
No.
During the broadcast, it was very quiet. Just went in there, did his laps, moved up. And got himself a great finish.
I remember hearing him on the radio a few times, but nothing major. They did bring up the fact that, we haven't seen an American on the grid full time since Scott Speed and Toro Rosso, yada, yada. But other than that, they're not giving too much light, which I guess makes sense. It might be that important to us, but to the rest of the world, he's just another rookie. My next bit of notes. Oh, I mentioned the soft tires. They went long. They went about 4 laps over the degradation period of those tires because a soft tire is, I don't know what the compounds are this season exactly, if they've changed that much. I know they did a little bit of tweaking, but I think the soft tire window is 11 to 15 laps typically, and I believe both Williams went 19 laps, 4 laps over. They went 19 to 20 laps over. No, sorry. They went 19 to 20 laps on their original pair of softs when everybody else had pitted and gone to hards. And they went a little bit longer on those and then I believe switched to the hards too. So giving them a little bit more time to get some life out of those tires, which is a good thing for them. That's showing that they're not only do they have speed, but they have a car that's not degrading their tires, like how Ferraris is, basically. Next note I have written down is that Red Bull strategy reigns supreme. Like we were talking about earlier with the Red Bull versus Ferrari strategizing. Red Bull is going out there and they're setting the tone for what they want to do and everybody else is following. Ferrari's trying to outsmart them doing all this and Red Bull doesn't have to worry about any of that. They're going out and doing what they do. Like I just mentioned with the Williams car, most cars went from soft to hard. They went on the soft tires and then ran long on the hards. Red Bull was so quick, they went soft to soft on their first pit.
Yeah, they decided to do a 2-stop.
Mm-hmm.
They figured, let's just go as fast as we can for as long as we can.
Yep, and it gave them enough distance, which in the end ended up being massive, that they were able to do a couple later in the race pit stops, which I think they still put on the hards for their second pit, right? The mediums just seemed to be giving nobody any love.
Yeah.
All weekend. I think we barely saw the mediums get used.
By the time Max went for that second pit stop, he was already about 40 seconds up.
Yeah, he was already lapping, at lapping space at that point. Yeah, he finished 12 seconds ahead of Checo, his teammate, and nearly 30 seconds ahead of Fernando Alonso. That's how fast that car was moving. That's how on point that strategy was. Just unbeatable all weekend. We also saw Mercedes struggling. This was a little bit of a shock because we thought going into this season, along with a lot of other people, that Mercedes was going to be getting a little bit back into shape. And it's kind of starting to look like they're not. I had a good time. I listened to Crofty, or one of the play-by-play commentators, announcing over the broadcast. He said, Russell getting frustrated behind Hamilton. And I don't know why, but that made me smile. That was nice to hear. I think George Russell was getting a little bit of a big head last year. He's kind of turned out to be not exactly my favorite driver. And I'm kind of rooting for Lewis to have a little bit of a rebound year. So seeing him put his foot down in this Mercedes team was nice. Put George in his place a little bit. So watching George try and get around his teammate and being unsuccessful was nice. What do you make of the whole Mercedes falling back situation?
It's something that it's interesting to watch because the past couple years this is the first time they've ever been in this position. They've always been the team that's just been dominating everyone, and they had a very long run in which they were doing so. 7
years consecutive. Not even just 7 years of their consecutive wins. 7+ years of dominance, because when they first took over from Bahrain GP, it only took them 3 or 4 years before they became Mercedes champions. Yeah. I want to say 2014, right? They won their first championship with Lewis.
Yeah.
So Bahrain GP wins in 2009. And it's a short time before they become world champions, but also were competitive. They had Michael Schumacher in the car. So yeah, long run of dominance.
Here's the thing. They're getting whooped by Aston Martin, who's using their motor.
Exactly.
So you look at those two cars and you say, okay, what's the biggest difference? Obviously, it's the aero package.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's saying, oh, the Aston Martin looks so similar to the Red Bull this year. Interesting. So you get the Red Bull aero with the Mercedes engine, and you got Aston Martin sitting in third.
Yeah, which is actually nothing new. Aston Martin was labeled the green Red Bull last season. So we should have seen the writing on the wall for what was going to be coming this season. Yeah, that has been labeled, a little bit of a smack in the face to the Mercedes team for having a team they supply an engine to, forcing them back in the pack. They dusted Mercedes all weekend.
It was cool seeing around lap 37, 38, seeing Alonso.
Yeah.
Going through that.
He passed George. He passed Lewis.
Just the cleanest passes. Mm-hmm. It was amazing to watch.
George defended him at one point nicely, and then Alonso backed off for a split second, and then not into the immediate next turn, but into the one after it, made his move again. Just persistence, and then he sought out Lewis, made that pass on him. At that point, I stood up and I cheered, alone in my living room at about 7:45 Pacific Standard Time, in my underwear. I was howling. It was...
Yeah, because it wasn't like they just rolled over for him. George was in there defending, trying as hard as he could to not let Alonso pass him.
They fought, and then we got a nice, they cut to Fernando's, his team radio, and he's in there cheering.
They go side by side. He's not going to try around the outside, but he is going to try the inside of turn 10. What a superb move from Fernando Alonso.
And we still had the DRS.
Yeah, that was just a great pass right there. I almost forgot that in the initial time when Fernando first tried to pass him, Lewis held tight and Fernando kind of winced. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, he kind of backed off a little bit. Yeah,
but he jerked hard to the left, and it brought him off the racing line. He had to catch back up, but he did it with ease. It looked almost for a second like they had touched, but it was Fernando predicting that Lewis was going to be there. Just great race sense, something that Fernando Alonso fans have been waiting for the past decade to see him being capable of making these moves again, and it just shows you what an absolute beast Fernando Alonso has been all these years.
See, because here's the thing. You can have the fastest car on the grid, but if you don't have the mental stamina and just the confidence to be able to drive like that and to be able to make those moves, like, you're not going to be able to get the same kind of results.
Yeah. I mean, that's the folly of F1, is being compared immediately to your teammate. You know, if you have, there's a big difference between, as much as we love him, Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. One of these guys is getting the most out of the car, and that's going to be the story for Aston Martin. You know, the Fernando Alonso and the Lance Stroll. You're going to see a big difference. And Fernando's that guy. He's going for it. He's putting in this bid that I myself said, yeah, right, about.
That's the thing everybody forgets. He's already has 2 championships under his belt. I mean, it was a long time ago, but he knows what it takes.
He's still Fernando Alonso.
Exactly.
I think he could also have probably 3, 4, maybe even 5. There were a couple of those championships that he missed out on by mere points, by literally one grid position. Excuse me. And I want to say 2013, Sebastian Vettel's first world championship, he moved into a position because Michael Schumacher let him. Seb moved up into the position that he needed, got the points that he just barely needed to beat Alonso. Had Michael Schumacher not moved over, Alonso would have been a 3-time world champion instead of a 2-time. Now, that's a lot of the good stuff. Let's bring the tone down a little bit.
Let's go depression mode.
Let's get dummy sad. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and McLaren. 2 words. Good God.
I'm bringing back this from last week. The Lando face.
Bring up sad Lando.
Sad Lando.
You don't have my screen on, by the way. I can't see it. What can we say about this? This is a complete 180 and even more. The opposite of what we felt about the Aston Martin story going into this. McLaren just looks absolutely abysmal. We talked about it last week that they wanted at best to finish P4. You guys right now would be lucky to finish P8 by the looks of it. And granted, this is only the first race. We'll give you that. This is only the first race, but oh shit, my mic just fell. And granted, this is only the first race. We will give you guys that. But you look absolutely abysmal. In qualifying, nowhere to be found. Lando Norris put it P10?
11.
P11. Not terrible, but that's Lando Norris, potentially one of the top 5 best drivers in the world, on track with clean air, getting every single ounce of that car out of it. And then on race day, everything that might have been good just absolutely fell apart. Let's talk first about his teammate, Oscar Piastri. He had a long stop. He pulled into the pits. He was having some kind of power issue, a steering wheel issue, something going on with the car that they thought by replacing the steering wheel would fix. So they do a little bit of a long stop. They give him a new steering wheel. And as soon as they put it on, Oscar's staring at it like he'd never seen one before.
Well, I don't know if you could see, like...
It took it the second. Normally, as soon as you put the steering wheel in, it fires up. It's already in the engine mode that it needs to be in. It did do a little bit of rebooting, but he also looked like he was in panic mode. He looked like he'd never seen a steering wheel before. And I'll give him the credit. First race, everything that can go wrong is going wrong, not only for him, but for the entire team. I'd be a little bit flummoxed too, I guess. But that's not where McLaren's issues ended. Lando Norris also had 2 long pit stops.
Within 18 laps of each other.
Yep. This basically ended up being, it got so bad for McLaren that, well, one, they ended up retiring Oscar Piastri's car altogether. They took so long in that pit stop.
Lap 14.
Yep. That there were literal mechanics leaning up against the car, waiting for them to get it fired up, and they just said, box it. We'll revisit this in Saudi Arabia. And then Lando Norris, 2 long pit stops, absolutely no pace, very little fight.
I don't know what it was, but did you see they were like refilling?
They were putting putting air back into a hydraulic pump that was supposedly leaking. Yeah, that's why a lot of his pit stops ended up being so long. But supposedly there was a little bit of a hydraulic leak that they kept. I forget what those little hydraulic balloons are, but it was leaking, and they had to continue to refill it to get that air pressure that they need inside of it. But Jesus Christ, man, it when it rains, it pours for McLaren. This is bad. Lando Norris has been a man who's already looked defeated. We've only had 2 weeks of this season. We've had testing and race 1. And I've never seen him look sadder. I say, despite the fact that it's week 1, round 1, start the rumor mill. Lando Norris is not going to stick around at McLaren.
I'm sure his agent's been on the phone last couple weeks.
And we already know what F1 contracts mean, and that's dog shit. These teams can throw around money like they're God. They'll break a contract whenever they want to. We saw it last year with this very team. It's sad. It's sad that one of the most historic teams in F1, a team with so much money, a team that just a few years ago was on the rise, fighting for not P4, but for P3. They were fighting with Ferrari to be the 3rd best team on the grid. And we gave them a lot of credit in our preseason rankings. They look back of the pack right now. They scored 0 points this race. I don't know how much better it's going to be. They might have to do their midseason upgrades early if they even can.
Yeah. At what point in the season do we expect them to just give up and call it a rebuilding year?
I think it was this morning. I think that happened this morning. I'm serious.
After lap 14.
Yeah. When I saw Oscar Piastri's face in that shot of him in the pit looking down at his steering wheel like it was a Game Boy and he was part of a lost tribe that had never seen electronics, I was like, this looks bad. And then Lando Norris doing a 5-stop race, and they were basically just using the remaining laps that they were getting out of that car as testing, just finding out information. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what could be going on in Lando's head right now. But like I said, I say start the rumor mill. I'll throw out a couple things. You can put the kibosh on him as you want. Lewis Hamilton is on a year-to-year contract. It's not looking like Mercedes is going to be the team to get him that 8th world championship, should he want to stay in F1. Lando Norris has been rumored to be the replacement for that for years. Do we see Lando Norris in a Mercedes next year?
No.
Sergio Perez has 2 years left on his Red Bull contract, I believe. This is a rumor that I've heard floating around quite a bit. I don't think Red Bull would get rid of Sergio Perez until his contract is up. But if Lando Norris can wait out this shitbox for the next 2 seasons, do we see Lando Norris in a Red Bull in 2 years?
That I can see a lot easier than a Mercedes drive.
Why do you think the Red Bull makes more sense than the Mercedes?
Because I don't see Mercedes making a move like that. I think they value Lewis too much as a...
But if Lewis walks away from the sport, or if Lewis chooses to walk away from that team,
I don't know.
Because I'm gonna paint a couple more scenarios for you here, and they're gonna piss you off.
I can't see him. I can't see him just like leaving and going to another team. I feel like with the amount of success he's had, the amount of stake he has in not only just the team, but the development of the car. He's giving a lot of input. They're kind of just building everything around what he
So you think
feels
Lewis
is
goes?
necessary.
Yeah, you think Lewis goes down with the sinking ship?
Sure, yeah.
Does he retire as a 7-time world champion, or does he go?
Maybe.
Does he go try and chase that 8th with another team?
I think if after another 3, possibly 4 seasons, if he doesn't have it.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
I don't know that he lasts that long.
Maybe 3, maybe 2 more.
3
after
sounds
this
a
year.
lot.
2 years after the season, he still doesn't have a chance of getting that 8th title, then I can just see him just retiring. And at that point, if George Russell is still there, he'll move up to be their number 1, and then they'll bring in a newer.
George already thinks he's their number 1. He's not. But I mean, that's a long time for a seat to come open. 3 years. I think in today's F1, 2 years is a long time to wait.
I mean, maybe Lewis after this year, he could be over it, decides he wants to go and start a fashion brand or something.
That's what I'm saying is does Lewis want to wait out the development of this car with this team? And if he doesn't, does Lando Norris slot in?
The read I get now is that he still has the passion. He still has the passion to go in there, put the time in, try to get the car right. I think he understands how long it's going to actually take.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if he was more worried, we would see that a little more. I feel like he's a little bit, although he is good at playing the game, I think he would give on a little bit more of an impression that he's not happy with how things are going.
Yeah. So then I think I'll preemptively say that Lando Norris's best option or his best outcome for his racing career right now would be to take over for Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, because Checo's already, I think he's 33 or 34.
And he's going to be what, number 2 to Max?
He's going to, yeah.
I don't know.
Who?
I don't know.
Lando?
Yeah.
I think that would be his best option and the most believable, because my next question is, would Lawrence Stroll make good on the promise to replace Lance in that seat should a better driver become available for the betterment of the team? Because that's something that he said. I don't know how believable it is.
I can't believe it.
They already have Fernando Alonso. Lance is going to be a proven number 2. But Lando would be an upgrade to Lance. There's no denying that. Imagine a Lando Norris, Fernando Alonso 1-2.
I still feel...
It's not going to happen.
Yeah. I still feel that what's going to end up happening is Lando's going to ride out the next couple years in McLaren, collect his check, grind it out, grit his teeth, and then moving to Audi to be the number 1 guy when they go to start the team.
That's true. That is true. I keep forgetting about Audi. There's already rumors that they're seeking him out. My worry, and the reason why I'm pressing the issue is that I don't know how much of this Lando Norris can take. That's a lot on a rookie to just be in the bottom. Look what it almost broke, especially a rookie of his ilk. If it was,
he's not a rookie though.
Not a rookie, but I would say a young driver. Sorry, not a rookie, a young driver, and a young prodigy, because he's in the echelon of just under Max Verstappen. He's of the same driving ability as Charles Leclerc, George Russell. He's right up there.
Yeah,
but he's the one who's making out on the bad end of all those guys who grew up together.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, in the thought that he's going to be enticed, but more by a team that he thinks he can win at than one that he thinks he's going to be just number 1 at.
And let's say this thing happens with Red Bull where they want to part ways with Sergio Perez, and they start shopping. Does Lando want to wait out for this option at Audi and see what happens there? Or in 2 years, if there's a contract on the table, does Lando take it at Red Bull? Lando Norris in a Red Bull Racing jumpsuit?
He might.
Sexy. I don't know. Just some... I love rumors. I could talk rumors all day long.
So should we move on to some of the other disasters that happened today?
Yeah, there was, outside of the McLaren shit show, there was one more shit show happening at a team that we talked about having a pretty lackluster showing up until Pierre Gasly went from P20 to finishing P9. Alpine. Their number one driver, Esteban Ocon, had just a comical first race of the season.
You really hate to see it.
He is, I think, a pretty beloved driver. It's funny, too. So he ended up getting 3 penalties. He faced, I think, a total of 20 or 25 seconds in penalties total. 2 of them his fault, 1 of them not his. But it was just hilarious because it was one after another that the FIA, the stewards, you were getting notifications at the top of the screen that he had been penalized again and again.
Yeah.
And again. And I tweeted something out that he was like Judd Nelson's character in The Breakfast Club, where he just kept getting more and more detentions.
Yeah.
You want another one? You got it.
Did you see what it was that initially got him the penalty?
The first one?
The grid order or the penalty?
Yeah, they were trying to say that he overstepped the line, right?
He was just to the right of the line, so he was kind of like, instead of being directly behind the line, he was to the right, so he was just like a little bit into the middle of the lane,
he ended up complaining about that, saying that that's something that he's done his entire career, and I've also seen other drivers do that.
Sure.
Go back to Baku of 2021, I think it was, when Max Verstappen DNF'd. Checo was at a 45-degree angle on the restart of that race when Lewis accidentally hit the magic button. He was crooked. I didn't even notice it when I think some of the commentary box was talking about it too, and they're like, yeah, that's a pretty iffy call. But he has to serve a penalty for that. He goes into the pit, and it's supposed to be a stop-go penalty, which his team fails to recognize, and they just started working on the front nose of his car as soon as he got in there.
Immediately grabbed the front nose.
Yeah, took it off, which gave him a 10-second penalty. And as he's leaving the pit lane from there, he speeds. So they give him another penalty.
That's rough.
And yeah, this was a rough race for a team that, like we said, they look lackluster going into the race. Overall, I think the team as a whole could have done a lot better because Pierre Gasly started P20, which I don't know what knocked him back that far. I'm not sure exactly where he qualified at, but he did.
He had a 132. He just didn't have the time. I think he might have missed.
There was no grid penalty for him because I was surprised to see him starting that far back.
No, it was straight from qualifying.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. They essentially swapped places.
Yeah, because Esteban Ocon had a pretty decent qualifying. But Pierre climbs. Esteban just has this comical fiasco his entire race. It was.
I'm really proud of Pierre.
I had, if it wasn't for Fernando doing what he did, I had Pierre as driver of the day.
Really?
Yeah. What were you saying? He climbed
from the back of the grid all the way up, just rode a clean race, didn't have too many issues.
Yeah. And he's on thin ice. He gets somewhere between 1 or 3 more penalty points, and he's suspended.
When is that up? It should be soon, right?
It was
for a year. He couldn't.
It's 1 year. I don't know when he hits it, but yeah, he doesn't. He has to run pretty clean races.
Yeah.
I thought he was gonna just run into the back of somebody in the AlphaTauri last year and get it over with, but no, he's riding into this season on a suspended license, basically.
So what about Ferrari?
Ferrari had issues all weekend long. Even in the practices, they were rubbing that curb. They seem to have such downforce on their car that their tires are degrading too fast. They were
similar to last year.
Yeah, they were bottoming out on the curbs. Carlos lost it in a turn, like we said earlier. And then 40 laps into this race, Charles Leclerc out of nowhere, his car shuts off. I, for one, because one, I'm a Max Verstappen fan. 2, didn't have Charles Leclerc on my fantasy team. And 3, wanted to see Fernando continue to rise up the order. I, for one, cheered as I saw this. As much of, I love Chuck, as much as it sucks to see him with such heartbreak, it just almost felt right. It almost felt right that a Ferrari is going through this. And then right around that time, Carlos's tires start to go.
Yeah. It was just about that same time was when he started to get pressure from Alonso.
Yep.
He called it right away. He was like, the crew was telling him he's got to pick up the pace. He says, I'm going to lose my tires, and that's pretty much what happened. He pushed for maybe a lap or two with Alonso behind him and just started to fall back from there.
Yeah, not a great look from the Ferraris to get things going. We got Charles Leclerc on the screen. You had to feel for him. Like I said, as happy as I was, you do have to feel for the kid. He knows that all his championship hopes this season are completely fading and have been replaced with Aston Martins.
Did you see him hiding his face when he was getting picked up on the scooter?
I didn't notice that he was hiding his face. I was paying attention to the brand of the scooter because I went and grabbed a screenshot of one online, and then I posted it on Twitter as the Vespa is Charles Leclerc's mortal enemy.
Yeah, you could tell he was really upset.
I'm sure. This I was just reminded of. With Charles Leclerc DNFing, is this going to be the curse of the first win? What would you call it? The first win of the season curse? Because I think something like in the last 5 years, whoever finished first in the season, in the first race of the season, finished second on the season. Does that make sense? I'm kind of overcomplicating my description.
No,
of this.
I understand, but I think it's going to be one of those things where Max is the exception that proves the rule.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you remember last season, the Red Bulls were in that scenario where both of them DNF'd with Red Bull powertrains.
This is the first time Max has ever won at Bahrain.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
His whole career, I guess, yeah. Last year was Leclerc. Year before that was Checo. Right? In the Racing Point?
Yeah.
I wonder, was there a year in between those? I don't know, but interesting. Either way, we won't know until late December if he breaks the curse. But it definitely is looking that way. Alonso clinches a podium. That was another good thing that came out of Charles Leclerc's DNF. I do think Alonso would have eventually passed him anyways. Leclerc was looking good, but Alonso was looking great. And neither one of the Red Bulls was going to give up position. Alonso clinches that goofy picture of Fernando Alonso with the big jaw.
Chad Nando.
Fernando Alonso clinches his first podium in, I forget how many races.
It's like 150, 160 or
yeah,
something.
in an amazing amount of races. And I believe his first in over 10 years, like I said earlier. But to wrap this up, Red Bull's domination this year, it's early in the season, but 30 seconds ahead of the rest of the pack. If the car holds, if the powertrain holds, Red Bull is going to trounce the field.
They showed this weekend that the rest of the field has a lot to make up.
Yeah. They're heading into a domination era that I think surpasses Mercedes over the last 8 or 9 years that we saw of them. Right now, nobody's as close to them as Ferrari was in the mid-2000s to Mercedes. Nobody's as close to Red Bull as Red Bull was to Mercedes in, the late 2020s or early 2020s, late 2010s, whatever you want to call it. Mercedes, all those years, had somebody kind of nipping at their heels. Last year, Red Bull had it a little bit with Ferrari up until the end. if things stay this way, Red Bull, it's never happened before. Red Bull could ace this season if their shit holds and nobody gets sick and nobody gets hurt. Do you think we could see a Max Verstappen 23 season win? Probably not.
Probably not. We'll probably see a DNF here and there.
We'll see one. He'll wreck.
Some mechanical failure that will keep him out.
Something will happen. That engine will go. But when that engine goes, will Checo fill in? Are they that dominant? Can they go? Can they do a 23-0 blank? Probably not. But if ever it could happen, man.
Well, here's the thing. First things first, does he beat the 15 wins?
That's what I was going to ask next. Yeah. Does he beat his own record that he just set? He set that record, or beat the previous record by like 2 races too, which is just trouncing it. 2 or 3. Absolutely trouncing it. Is he going to beat his own record this year with an added race? We have 24 races on the calendar this season, right?
23.
23? What did we have last year? 22?
Yeah.
So we have an extra race for him to get one more under his belt. Man, they look just poised to sweep it all. So good on them. And is the Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin hype train real? After this roller coaster of a weekend where we go, oh my God, they look amazing. All throughout testing, all throughout practice, we're all putting them up on this pedestal, and then they get brought back down where neither one of them qualifies great, but then in the race, they're making overtakes, and Fernando Alonso is just cruising. He's got his top down. He's got his hair in the wind. He's living the high life. Are they real? I think so. We ranked them. Where did we put them? At best, we put them, I think, 4th, right?
Yeah, it was either 4th.
Going into our preseason rankings, and I think we were on par with a lot of the pundits, a lot of the other voices in F1. But they were probably slated at best to be at the top of the midfield. Fuck the midfield. They're championship contenders. Despite everything I just said about Red Bull dominance, but being number 2 makes you a championship contender. I don't see Ferrari battling with them. A healthy Lance Stroll is going to help them out a hell of a lot more. Once they get their qualifying pace in check, when they can translate their practice times into qualifying and get that shit all tuned up, they're a legit number 2 contender. That's jumping 5 places. They went from 7th place last year.
Yeah, I would say maybe not championship contender, but definitely a race win contender.
Race win, oh yeah, that might be a better way to put it. I do think Red Bull is going to run away with the championship. But also being 2nd place means that you get to pick up the scraps. Any mistake Red Bull makes means that it's Aston Martin's opportunity. So should anything go wrong with Red Bull, which I don't think it will, but should it, they're going to be the ones to pick up the scraps.
Yeah, here's the thing.
What's the thing?
Fernando obviously got a good handle on the car immediately. I'm still curious how Lance is gonna fare. He looked really strong with hands and all. I was kind of worried how his stamina was gonna be throughout the race. He proved that he was capable. Did a great job.
I think Lance is gonna come out swinging. Once his wrists are fully healed, this is his first time in an actual competitive car. The Racing Point was pretty competitive. I think he was also less mature and less of a driver back then. I think it took Aston Martin being brought down a few pegs and a couple rough seasons with them. I think Lance is going to come out and he's going to really want to prove that he deserves that seat and that it's not just being the heir to any sort of a throne because his dad owns the team. But he wants to prove that he can actually, be part of a championship team. Everything that Fernando Alonso has predicted so far has happened. And what else did Fernando Alonso predict?
Not sure.
That Lance Stroll will be a world champion.
Former, yeah. We shall see.
Maybe that's all part of El Plan.
Maybe.
Who knows? I've talked a lot of shit about Aston Martin, and it's not even that I've talked shit. I think my as close to a direct quote as I can give myself was that for whatever reason, I couldn't give two shits about Aston Martin and that I liked Racing Point better. Well, guess what? All of a sudden, because of the excitement they've brought back, I give a shit about Aston Martin.
Hey, we're here for it.
Lawrence Stroll may still not be my favorite. I've always been a Fernando Alonso fan. I've always stuck up for Lance Stroll, saying that he's more than just a paid driver. And now that they have this car, now that they have this exciting storyline that we're able to follow, I'm here for Aston Martin. And all of a sudden, that green on that car is not looking so bad in my eyes. At first, I didn't like it.
Green, it's beautiful.
Now, you know what? I'm starting to get pretty privy to it. Now, to wrap this up, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I'm curious how, as the season progresses, on all the other teams start adding developments to the car and start to progressing it better, if they're going to maintain that same level of progression development.
Will it be too much for them to handle? Who knows? Maybe, maybe 10 races into this season, they're going to fall off, and I'm going to be like, you know what? I was right about that piece of shit team.
Yeah.
Their dumbass billionaire owner that looks like Scar from The Lion King. I'll be eating my words. I'm already eating crow.
Yeah.
I tweeted that out.
So
That's going to be my dinner tonight.
Yeah, so we have the Aston Martin hype train. Do you think we can say that we have a Williams hype train starting to leave the station?
I think there's a little bit of coal being tossed into the burner of a Williams hype train. They got a little tiny locomotive, a little engine that could, a little Thomas the Tank engine, whatever you want to call him, brewing at Williams. I've been saying it since the start of the season. They're on the up and up. They started showing straight line speed last year, maybe even before that, back all the way back to when George was on the team. Straight line speed is just a good indication of power that the car can generate. It's when you get the whole package together, the entire aero package, and you're able to corner just as quickly that you start seeing real advancement. And we're starting to see it, not only with just the car, but with the drivers and the team as a whole. Alex Albon is really coming into his own. He's taken that first driver's seat and running with it. And like we said earlier, Logan Sargent's embracing his role as a rookie. He had a stellar start. Where did he finish?
12.
P12 might not seem like a lot, but P12 in a Williams in your very first race, hey man, good on you. That's great.
Beautiful. Love it.
You're a few seconds away from 2 more points. You know what I mean? I do think that the Williams hype train is something to jump on now. I'm here for it. I've been an Alex Albon fan.
You'll be conductor?
I'll conduct that train, yeah. If anything, I'll be the little bellhop selling, sandwiches and shots of whiskey in the, what do you call the commerce section of a train? I forget. The galley.
The galley, yes.
Yeah, I'll be the little salesman in the galley, just so long as I can be on the train. But yeah, Williams looks good. Aston Martin looks good. Red Bull looks great.
Did you see at the post-race conference Sergio's statement that he was glad to see 3 Red Bulls up on the podium?
No.
That was pretty funny.
I missed that. Oh, wow, what a shot.
Calling the Aston Martin a Red Bull.
I mean, hey, they've been guilty of it before.
Yeah.
It was brought up on the broadcast today that they followed the Red Bull design, but with a Mercedes engine. They were caught literally on paper copying Mercedes car when they were Racing Point, and then like we brought up earlier in the podcast, that last year they were caught sort of following Red Bull's aero design already. Hey man, get it how you live.
Do what you gotta do.
They're going to end up in second place, and Ferrari's going to be trying to outsmart Red Bull all the way to the bottom, or at least a third. Maybe not as far down to the bottom as McLaren, but still not on the top. Anyways, guys, that has been Into the Chicane, the Bahrain Grand Prix post-race edition. We will see you guys next time with our Saudi Arabia wrap-up. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to, now that we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're also on Anchor.
Oh,
I don't know if you know, on Anchor, people can actually leave us voicemails.
no.
Yeah, and believe it or not, we actually got a few voicemails already.
Did we really?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to check them out. now.
I had no idea. Oh, this is what you were hiding from me.
Yeah, so just as our first one, let's see here.
Hello there, Channing and Brandon. This is the 44th President of the United States.
Oh, wow.
Barack Obama. I just wanted to call in and tell you that I love the new podcast. Even though the producer uses the phrase you know and like way too much, it was nice to hear analysis of my favorite international motorsport without all the British stuff. Keep up the good work, gentlemen. You make this country proud.
Yeah, can you believe Obama listens to the show?
Barack Obama, of all I mean, what an honor, Mr. President. Thank you so much. Also living up to the hype that Democrats are robots.
We got some other ones. I don't know if you want to hear those as well. Yeah.
Hello there, Channing and Brandon. This is radio legend Casey Kasem. I just wanted to tell you that I'm really impressed with your new podcast in the Chicane. Your insight and humor is something I think has been missing from Formula One media. Just keep up the good work. Remind Brandon that it's okay if he says you know and like too much. It's a very common thing that happens when you're first starting out in broadcasting. Ciao.
Was that Chow?
Casey Kasem, can you believe it?
Radio legend, star of Saved by the Bell, Casey Kasem. I mean, that's, you know what's really incredible is that none of the people who have left us voicemails can pronounce their own last name.
It must be something with the...
must be a bad connection.
Yeah. I don't know.
What's that last one we got there?
Hold on.
And Brandon just wanted to drop you a line, tell you that I love the new podcast. Thanks for making the Formula One show that is informative and fun, like all those British shows. Keep up the good work, holla.
Yeah, I think that was Snoop.
Yeah,
my buddy Snoop.
I couldn't make out a whole lot of what he was saying. I did like the cadence was in rap, but wow.
So it's good to hear that there's people out there listening and enjoying to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad that we've got such a wide reach from politics all the way to entertainment.
Everyone loves Formula One.
Everybody does. I imagine that our next one will be Shaq. What a fan that he is. Shaq, Brad Pitt. I'm sure we'll be calling in anytime soon.
You never know.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do forgive you for saying like and I say them myself. And like that will be this episode. Like I said earlier, we will catch you guys around the next chicane. How about that?
That's beautiful.
In Saudi Arabia. Check us out on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, our Into the Chicane Quick Pits, YouTube. Peace.